Hi, my name's Tim, and this is my response to the 21st Century Music Practice Research Network's call for their online symposia under the theme of Restriction and Affordances, number 2. As soon as I received the email with the information about this call, I pretty much instantly knew that I would quite like to use some of the text from that email as a seed for a compositional process using Sonic Pi. But not in the usual way of using Sonic Pi as a live coding environment, but using it to actually create a fixed composition. So I was interested in the restriction of just using the text, and the particular text was the quotation by Stravinsky. But I also wanted to try and code in such a way that I was using metaphors that would be familiar to composers who have maybe come from a more traditional background. So using metaphors of score, players, parts, instruments, and so forth. What I did was I recorded myself doing the composition, which took way longer than I was expected. So what I'm presenting here is a sped up version of that film with a narration over the top that I've done to draw attention to the salient points of the compositional process and to give some insight into what's how the piece has been constructed. So hopefully when the piece is played at the end, you'll have some idea of what's going on underneath. So there's nothing else being used here apart from the quotation and a standard Sonic Pi install with no samples and no plugins, just working with those limitations. So once the quotation is copied into Sonic Pi, the first thing I need to do is change it into numbers. So breaking it down into words, and then those words into letters, converting each of the letters to a number, and then putting it back into its word to form a pattern that we can use for the music. Notice that the print command there is posting stuff into the post window on the right hand side, and you can see the letters appearing and the numbers being transposed there. Then we need to structure the code, so we're going to do this using a score, metaphor for a score, parts, an instrument, and a player. So the player, there'll be 4 players and they'll play the same instrument, but they'll be passing different parameters to that instrument, so it will sound very differently. You can see the parameters being defined now. There'll be 18 of them in total. So for instance, the pattern that's being played, the length of the pattern, how many times it's repeated, what's the source sound going to be, the envelope, the amplitude, this type of thing from the synthesizer. And you can see that all those things have to be inside the instrument and be used in some way once the data has been passed into the instrument. So here the player is just being coded to respond to the score. So it's just going to look along all the lines of the score, pull out the value for the parameters it needs to play the instrument, and then it passes those to the instrument to get played. So at the moment I'm just trying to get something up and running to just produce one single sound to check that these things all work in principle. So you can see that I'm using reps there and length of time, and I'm just using the play command to just play the default sound in Sonic Pi. You can't hear the sounds in this version at the moment, but you can hear that on the long edition. So you can see a sleep in there, so that's determining the kind of duration for each of the notes that's being played, and you'll notice that there's going to have to be a stop in there as well, so that the player knows to stop the point when it comes to the end of its score, so the part of its score. So this is just going to be a case of now going down these parameters that we've got there. You can see gap, sound, effects 1, 2, and 3, and we're just going to put those into the instrument and code them so that they actually do something when they're passed a value. I'm now putting in some global things. So for instance, the BPM of the piece can be set globally. There's some envelopes that I'm setting up. Rather than have every single instrument having a different envelope, I'm just going to set 4 up there, and GT is a global transposition, so we can move the piece wholesale up and down if we want to. And that's important because we could use the numbers from the Stravinsky quote either as MIDI or as Hertz, and I'm going to use both in this, and you can see that I'm coding that now. I've got 4 plays in there. One is for 2 of them are for sequences or chords, and then the combination is hertz or MIDI. So that gives us 4 combinations. And if it's hertz or MIDI, it will be transposed slightly differently. And you can also see now that the attack, decay, and the envelope has now been programmed in. So that's going to give us some shape to the notes. And you can see also that the parameter list is going down. The amplitude is now in, so that means that it's going to know how loud to play, and the pan is also in. So basically the pan is going to be very simply, if it's set to 1, it's going to randomly pan, and if it's set to 0, it's not going to pan at all. It's just going to be centered. So just keeping that reasonably simple. You can see that the red lines at the bottom are showing that I'm getting some errors in when I'm trying to code this, which is, inevitable. Sometimes it's just because the data's not in the patch, and it's just putting zeros in, which the instrument doesn't like. So you can see now that I'm putting actual values into the parts list at the top now. So that's going to grow quite a lot, that part list, and also the score once we start putting it in there. Interestingly, I've got length now. I've just put in the length parameter. I decided to override the length of the words because it helped to synchronize, because the words are all different length, rather than having them loop around for their word length, which they do sometimes. I've also allowed to overwrite this in certain instances. You can see that I'm testing there to see if all the words worked there. They all flipped up, and now I'm in the process of actually creating the patches. So these are the parameter sets. Now it looks like I'm just typing in random numbers, but actually I've tested these, and you can see I'm giving them little names at the end so that I can remember what they sound like, and I'm also giving them the duration at the end. So that's going to help me when I start to construct the score, because it's these parameter sets, it's the number that represents each of these lines that's going to go in the score, and that's what the players are going to pull out and use. So at the moment I'm down to 9 or 10. I think I'm going to get to something like 20 of these rows. Some of them are rests, so you can see the first one actually is just an 8-bar rest, and as I worked more I realized that I needed rests of 4 bars, 2 bars and 1 bar as well. So if you see pattern or part 0 in the score, you know that that's going to be an 8-bar rest. If you see, I think it's 18, 19 and 20, you'll also see that's going to be rest as well. One of the interesting things about working in this way from a compositional point of view is that unlike players reading a regular score, the players in this instance aren't synced for the duration of the piece. So that poses some interesting issues when you're trying to create points of synchronization within the piece that need to be overcome. Okay, so these parameters now are finished, and what's going to happen is that the score at the top there, where there's those 4 lines of 2 digits, are going to be replaced by the actual score. So we'll see the parts for player 0 now entering the screen. So essentially player 0 is just going to run through these parts, passing the parameter, the patch number to the instrument, and then those parameters will be played by the instrument. So what I'm going to do in a second when the score's finished is to fade down this narration and fade up the narration from the original film and slow it down, just so you can hear the ending, and it may give you an insight into how to read the score when the piece is being played. So I hope you enjoy the piece, and thanks very much for watching. So just before I play the piece, I'm just going to let you know a couple of things. You'll notice in the score that there are some 20s at the beginning here. That's just rests, the lead time. So you can see patch 20 here is a 4-bar rest. And I've added some other rests, 19 and 18 as well. They're rests, 1 bar, 2 bar. And we've got an 8-bar rest, which is patch 0. So when you see those ones, 0 and 18, 19, 20, there are rests in there. You'll notice that the 8s don't have a leading 0, nor the 9s, because Sonic Pi thinks they're hexadecimal if you put those in front. Oh, I just noticed that needs to go. So I can bring this up a little bit. And the last thing is, it would be good to have some little idea from the players what they're actually playing at any one time, so that it will help follow the score if you wanted to do that. So I'm just going to ask them to tell us something about what they're doing. So I'm asking it there to tell us what. So the first parameter in the string of the patch is what word they're using. So I'm asking it to tell us what word, but I'm only asking it to do that if parameter 13 is not equal to 0, because parameter 13 is the amplitude. So I know that if the amplitude's 0, because I put all the rests to amplitude 0, I know they're not actually playing anything, so we don't want it to tell us anything about that. And the other thing is just to give us which section they're on and which patch they're playing. So this will tell us display 0. So now I can copy and paste these into the other players, and hopefully if I change their player number, so this is player okay, good, that seems to be happy with that. So if we go up to the score now and I just run it for a second, we should get a report back from the player when it starts to play. Yeah, great. So player 0 has told us that they're playing the word more, and they're in section 1, and lo and behold, they're playing patch 2. So that if you watch this panel here, the post window, you should see some orientation about where you are in the score and which patches are being played. So okay, so we can play the piece now and see how it goes.